I would like to welcome you all to our session this afternoon. It's a big privilege for us to be able to attend this REAIM Summit in Seoul. We have a panel discussion today under the heading Implementing the EU's Assessment List for Trustworthy AI. And we, on a daily basis, we call it the ALTAI. So whenever we mention that abbreviation, we mean European Assessment List for Trustworthy AI. And we want to focus on how we implement the ALTAI in our EU project, which is called AI4DEF. And that's, again, an abbreviation which we use a lot. And it stands for Artificial Intelligence for Defense. My name is Johan Dreyer Nielsen. I work for a Danish company called Therma. And today I'm here because of my role in the AI4DEF project, which I'm heading as a project coordinator. And before I introduce my fellow panelists, I would like to give you just a few words on the background of our AI4DEF project. It's, as I said, it stands for Artificial Intelligence for Defense, and it's a project that we started almost 3 years ago. It was quite a historic decision at the time, at least, because the EDIDP, again, an abbreviation, it stands for the European Defence Industrial Development Programme, decided for the very first time to directly finance a defence development project. And we were fortunate enough to be that one project. And I'm sure all of you know that the artificial intelligence has become a key technology in our society, and certainly also now in the military world. So this rapidly progress within AI, and of course all the concerns that are related to AI in the military domain, has given a lot of weight and strength to the work we do in the AI4DEF project, because what we actually do on a daily basis is to study and also to demonstrate via 3 demonstrations how the benefits of AI in 2 areas can help the armed forces. And those 2 areas are situational awareness, decision making, and planning optimization. So we focus on those 2 functional areas throughout the project. Also, from day 1 of the project until the very end, we have a big focus on ethical considerations. The project, just to give you a few facts, it runs over 3 years. We are 21 partners in the project. 19 of these are small, medium, and large industries. And then we're also fortunate to have 2 research institutions on board, one from Denmark and one from Germany. So our hope is that you'll find these next 1.5 hours extremely interesting. We're so pleased you decided to join our panel discussion. And before we really get going, I would very much like to get the other panelists to introduce themselves. So let's start with the 2 ladies that are participating online from Germany. So if you, Vanessa, could please start.
Good morning, everyone from Germany. Good afternoon to Seoul. My name is Vanessa Vohs. Unfortunately, I'm not there with you. I still have my badge here from last year's REAIM, so I hope you have a great time there in South Korea. I am the internal ethics advisor of the AI4DEF project, and I'm based at the University of the Armed Forces, where I'm a research associate and doctoral candidate. I'm really much looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Vanessa. And on to you, Elisabeth.
Yes, hello and good morning from Germany to Seoul. My name is Elisabeth Hoffberger-Pippan. I am more or less the external panelist in this session today. I am senior researcher at the Peace Research Institute Frankfurt. My main research focus lies at the intersection of international humanitarian law and emerging technologies. And prior to joining PRIF, I was head of the International Panel on the Regulation of Autonomous Weapons. And it's a pity I can't be in Seoul today in person, but just like Vanessa, I participated in the REAIM conference last year, and I'm very much looking forward to this panel and to our debate.
Thank you so much, both of you. Nice to have you here, even though it's only online. So could we move to you, Arnault?
All right, so hi everyone, I'm Arnault Ioualalen. I'm the CEO of a company called Numalis. We're specialized in reliability of AI system. We develop tools to measure it. And we also, on the side, developed standards. And so by standards, we mean AI standards at the ISO IEC committee, but also at the Senelec, which is the European equivalent. And the aim of that is to provide the necessary standards for the civilian world, at least, to equip the regulation of the EU, which called the AI Act, regarding the implementation of AI in critical systems.
Thanks a lot. Alex?
Yes, my name is Elkjær Vasegaard. I come from Aalborg University, where I am situated as a postdoctoral researcher in the operations research group. I say my background is mathematics, so it's a bit more technical to the AI research. I'd say my main focus is what is called multi-objective optimization, where I specifically focus on how to implement human preferences in different types of optimization and autonomous settings. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. And last but not least, Bruno?
Thank you very much, Johan. Thank you, Alex, for the transition as well. My name is Bruno Caron. I belong to Airbus Defence and Space Division. So I'm particularly working on the use of artificial intelligence for our industry. I'm a senior expert in artificial intelligence in our company. And here I have the privilege also to be the technical coordinator in this project. So this work is really to ensure that in all the different situations we have, in all the use cases that we will describe later on, we consider exactly how this technique, this technology can bring in a trustworthy manner what is expected from the operational person.
Thanks a lot, all of you. And now that we know who is on the panel, I think we should get started what we are actually here for, and just some practical information. If you have a lot of questions, we are more than happy to try and answer them. And we would like to keep questions to the end of our session to ensure that we get through all the items that we have planned for today. So please note them down, or yeah. So let's get started. And I think what we discussed was we would like to start out with the roles of artificial intelligence in defense. And I believe that, of course, we'll see it in a context of our AI4DEF project. And Bruno, I believe you will have some input here with regards to the operational activities. And then my hope is, Alex, that you can contribute and discuss a bit on the selection of technologies that we have used in this project. So please.
Yes, thank you, Johan. So actually, it was the first challenge in this project to identify what operational activity we would like to support with artificial intelligence. And initially, my first guess was that there could be a few of them, but not so numerous. We used to have our project divided in 4 different use cases. So we range quite a lot of different situations. The first use case on UAV rerouting. So there is UAV, which is there to acquire some intelligence information. And the idea is that there are some events in different places that may require that the flight of the UAV is a little bit modified. And the question was how artificial intelligence may support this type of activity. Optimization, you mentioned it, Alex, earlier. This is typically what artificial intelligence is good at. We have some further intelligence context with joint ISR, where we were looking to all the different types of collection of intelligence and how to best support that. And guess what? The operational people we have been talking to, they were really asking for being supported in all their different activities. And that was the first learning for me as the technical coordinator on the project, that there is a very high level of expectation of artificial intelligence from the operational side. I was more expecting a bit of reluctancy, but not at all. This is, and there are very strong motivation for that. I will detail in a minute. And we do have two further use cases. One which is more at the tactical level, and that's how to best guide the tactical commander to inform him about what has been observed in the terrain, what are the consequences for the intent of the adverse commander. So how to best plan the enemy movement, how to learn what the enemy is made of, and how to detect which would be the next step. And the last one is more on the combat phase. We have an opponent that has started a movement, and the question was, is it possible that AI gives a superiority in the combat by better engagements? That are the full range of application that we have considered. And this makes a very long story. We have in the end some more than 25 different scenarios that we have illustrated in our project, where we just rely on data and we try to train models and provide artificial intelligence that will help solving those different questions. And then in that respect, the problem is which AI to select, which is the best suitable for being trustworthy in a particular context. And then, Alex, this is you explaining how we select the best AI.
That was a perfect transition. Yeah, so on Bruno's point, so you can hear we have this diverse set of possible applications and use cases and scenarios that we have had in our project. And the goal is then to quickly being able to design and implement some AI technologies. And to do so, there's 2 points in our selection methodology that I want to raise. Well, the first one is that the civilian AI say innovation and development is going very, very fast. So we should be able to at least be inspired by that, both in terms of from the academic sense and from the industrial phase or setting. And then the next thing is that the landscape of AI is extremely complex. So we need some taxonomy. We needed some taxonomy to be able to describe all these different AI techniques that could be. And here we relied on the EDA taxonomy, EDA AI taxonomy, so the European Defense Agency's AI taxonomy. Okay, so we have these two points. So basically, the entire process is then that we have a military problem domain. We want to convert into some understanding of what you can call the civilian problem domain. So find a problem that is somewhat similar or that can be inspired to at least have some similar, you would say, AI techniques that could be applied. So from the military problem domain, we then needed some keywords to describe this problem. And we saw that there was a lot of, I would say, issues or problems in terms of that some keywords from the military problem domain are very, very different from what you would call them in the similar civilian application. In the sense of one of the use cases or one of scenarios, it could be that it's for routing drones, this rerouting use case. So some of the keywords could be drone or routing, or it could be onboard, to basically describe what setting is the AI technique gonna be implemented in, and what describes the problem. Then we went to some, I would say, literature databases to basically identify what pool of papers have been published, and then through that we identified like a long set of or a pool of research papers. We then had to identify what solution techniques or AI techniques were then applicable in those. So we had a large language model to identify what AI techniques that they have been used. So and then we basically end up, now we have like a set of AI techniques. Now we have to understand, okay, how applicable are they? How popular are they? Perhaps it's just one research paper that has applied at one time. And then also how relevant are they? So we devised some statistics in order to understand this relevancy and the popularity. The next thing is then that we have to then evaluate it based on these other type of characteristics, such as explainability and the performance we expect to get out of it, and let's say characteristics of that nature. Ultimately, to end up with a pool of possible AI techniques, and these, for example, in the case of the drone routing, possible AI techniques that would then show up would be A*STAR and some online neural network applications. So you could very rapidly, through this automated approach, identify a pool of AI techniques that could at least support the then developers' job of actually implementing AI in the defense domain. Yeah.
And you didn't mention how we considered ethics when we choose the AI techniques. Do you want to elaborate on that, or?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
will you, Bruno?
So you're meaning in terms of the
to select the right, yeah.
Yeah. So we have these characteristics or features that we are basically evaluating the approaches up against. So this shortened pool of possible AI techniques, that could be explainability. So then we have people identifying, okay, how well do they perform in terms of this one characteristic, and then we move on to the next one. How well are they performing according to?
Maybe to add one word, I think we all know that the characteristics of an ethical system for artificial intelligence should rely on a category of properties, and the European Union has defined a set, but it's also in NATO in other, and we will talk about it later. These properties, they are both a characteristics of the AI itself, the algorithm that is explainable or not, and also the constraint and the operational use, because it's mainly how it is used, not just the algorithm itself. An algorithm is not particularly ethical or not, it's the way we use it. And that was the main effort we had to do in the project, to link the two aspects, and then we will enter further in the details.
Exactly. And I think that now that you described this, the process, Alex, and how we select the method, it would be interesting to ask, even though we don't have a big audience today, it would be interesting just to ask them about the regulations, because of course we need to comply with the regulations, and that's an issue we haven't discussed yet. And fortunately, we have the two ladies with us online who will know a lot about this. But I think it would be interesting just to ask you in the audience what type of regulation you use in defense. So if I could please ask you to raise your hand, I'll bring a few keywords to you, and you're more than welcome to raise your hand on several occasions, but just to get a feeling of what you're using. So you're not using any regulation at all? No. You're using civilian regulation? You're using NATO regulation? You're using EU regulation? You're using national regulation? Or you're using self-made regulations?
Very interesting.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
It is a question that we might have to raise as industry providers, and I represent here an industry. What if we have to face different regulation in different places? How compatible are they? That's a big question, but then we'll have maybe some further explanation on that.
Thanks. It works. So that was actually very interesting to see the raise of hands in the audience. And Elisabeth, I think I would give the floor or the microphone to you and just ask you, what did this vote in the audience tell you?
she didn't have the results.
She was not able to see the result. So sorry.
If I sum up, it's in the range of everyone is applying regulation, but there were a balance quite equivalent with self-made national and NATO or European. Like these are the main elements.
True. Thanks. And sorry, Elisabeth. I didn't realize you were not able to see the audience. So sorry.
That's no worries at all. I tried to get a guess, but it was impossible for me to draw any conclusions. But thank you very much. Now I'm in the full picture. I think what that really shows us is I think there are many potential regulators out there, but we risk that fragmentation might create significant challenges not only for industry stakeholders, but actually also for those who wish, for example, to regulate AI in the defense sector and to guarantee that AI can be used responsibly in the defense sector. I think fragmentation is a high risk. And then another challenge that adds another layer of complexity is that we also have regulatory approaches from the civilian sector and the civilian side, and many industry stakeholders need to cater both industries at the same time to a certain extent at least. So I think this is really something we need to be cautious about.
True. I know that we have touched upon the EU AI Act. Could you say a few words on that, how we can maybe use that or not use that in the military world?
Yes, of course. So when we talk about the EU AI Act, I think it is really important to first kind of analyze what the EU AI Act actually is. It is a regulation, and as a regulation, it is directly applicable in EU member states, and thus it is also, theoretically at least, directly applicable, for example, for industry stakeholders. The EU AI Act actually was made to classify AI systems based on the risks they pose for civil societies, civilians, and so on and so forth. But we have to be very cautious because the EU AI Act can only cover a certain area within the European Union's competences. According to Article 2, paragraph 3 of the EU AI Act, there is an exception, and in this area, the EU cannot just adopt, for example, in a regulation and also not a directive. I will just try to read out loud the original terminology because it really shows us actually what the EU cannot and did not want to regulate. So according to Article 2, paragraph 3 of the EU AI Act, the regulation does not apply to AI systems where and insofar they are placed on the market, put into service, or used with or without modification exclusively for military, defense, or national security purposes, regardless of the type of entity carrying out those activities. And this is really important because we can see that the EU AI Act, in fact, does not apply to military, defense, or national security purposes, but only in case such technologies are exclusively used for the military sector. The EU AI Act also says that, for example, if a technology can be used in both ways, in the military realm, in the defense sector, but also in the civilian sector, then the regulation does apply, at least to a certain extent. And this is really important because this brings significant challenges for industry stakeholders when it comes to dual-use technology. The EU AI Act also says that if you have a technology that is normally only be used for the military, but is then later adapted and used in a civilian context, the EU AI Act applies. It is also really interesting if you look at the EU AI Act that it also was a bit cautious because it uses the terminology placed on the market, put into service, used with or without modification. The EU AI Act, for example, does not apply to any research, testing, or development activity regarding AI systems or AI models prior to their being placed on the market. So here, the European Union, the legislators really tried not to over-regulate AI developments and so on and so forth. The EU AI Act also says such activities shall be conducted in accordance with applicable union law, but testing in real-world conditions shall not be covered by that exclusion. And I think when we need to evaluate how the military or the defense sector should react to the EU AI Act, this regulation or this proviso is also really important because it allows research, it allows testing, it allows development. But when it comes to testing in real world conditions, this exclusion is not applicable. So we can see here that even this proviso is quite complex. There is a recital 24 in the EU AI Act, which clarifies in more detail how industry stakeholders, how policymakers should react to this regulation. But it is really, really important that we can see here issues are getting ever more complex, and industry stakeholders might be faced with a number of challenges because they need to evaluate when is the EU AI Act applicable, when is it not applicable. And I think a certain level of coherence sometimes between the civil and the military sector might, of course, be helpful for industry stakeholders to know what exactly is going on and what kind of legal obligations they actually have to adhere to.
Thanks a lot, Elisabeth. I mean, from the raise of hands in here and from what you're just saying about the EU AI Act, then, well, it's kind of a leading question, but it sounds to me that we need a lot more regulation in this area. Would you agree?
I would agree that we need regulation. I would also agree, I wouldn't say that we need more regulation to a certain degree. I would say we need more coherent regulation. So I know sometimes we cannot compare the civilian sector, for example, with the defense sector. That is obvious. But if we find common ground so that we can see is there room for convergence, where, to what extent, and to what, in what kind of areas can, for example, AI be used responsibly, both in the civilian and the military sector? I mean, when you look, for example, at the EU strategy on artificial intelligence, the EU has also developed certain principles on trustworthy AI. In the military, we rather use the term responsible AI, but there are some similarities, and I think it would be necessary and important to evaluate and determine what are the differences between the civil and the military sector, what are the main differences, but also what are the commonalities, because that might be really important for industry stakeholders, especially when we talk about dual-use technology. And sometimes and what I also wanted to briefly mention, I think now is the time that people get more and more aware of the fact that industry stakeholders in general need to be involved more often in the debate on autonomous weapon systems, for example, but also AI in the defense sector in a broader context. We can see, for example, the NATO AI strategy, which was updated this year, an explicit acknowledgement of the importance of the industry stakeholders. But also when we look at General Assembly resolution, I think it was 278241. I need to valid the exact number. It's a 78241 of 28th December 2023. Here we could also see an explicit acknowledgement of the importance of industry stakeholders in the debate. So I think I cannot even say that we need more regulation, but I think we need more regulation that takes into consideration the needs and the demands of the industry stakeholders, so that they can provide developed manufacturer systems which are then able to comply with the legal and ethical standards that we need to, of course, adhere to.
Thanks a lot. That was a good answer. So Vanessa, that would then lead me to you, I believe, because Elisabeth explained the regulations we have, the regulations we may not have, at least not yet. But I know you would have some words to say on the soft law side, as we call it on a daily basis. Please.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much. If I may add, obviously, it's necessary for defense companies to produce products that are eventually capable of complying with international humanitarian law, right? That's our basis when we talk about questions of armed conflict. But again, these rules are quite old, let's say. And back then, I think artificial intelligence was not in the head of most people thinking about warfare. Still, international humanitarian law obviously is applicable. So, we need to be able to comply with the rules of distinction, for instance, proportionality, and all of that. But when we talk to defense companies and industry stakeholders, sometimes for them, it's really hard to, translate those rules, the general rules, to very precise questions when you use AI in the defense realm. And that's why it's helpful perhaps to look beyond those binding rules of international law, but also look at some soft law standards. So something that is not law yet, but might develop to become law from different organizations and states. So that's what we did at the beginning of the project. And Elisabeth already mentioned IPRO, the International Panel on the Regulation of Autonomous Weapons. So obviously this is just one range where you can use AI. Here in AI4DEF, we use many different areas than laws, but still it's very helpful to look at the results from the Human Control Report, because the basis for understanding how we should use AI trustworthy in the military realm is to say that we need to have control in two ways. So control by design, that means technical control, and also control in use, so operational control. That means that we need to have a lot of stakeholders involved. So we listen to Alex when he's looking for AI techniques. Obviously, he needs to make sure that those techniques that we use are able to allow for technical control. But in the end, it's also about the operators using those AI systems, and they need to be in control as well. So I think this is a very basic but still important takeaway from IPRO here. We also have, different principles. For instance, the US DoD has the AI ethical principles. I don't really want to go deep into it, but just to mention, a couple of standards. Here, they say it's about responsible, equitable, traceable, reliable, and governable AI. When we look at NATO, not too surprising, these principles sound quite similar. Here we talk about lawfulness, responsibility, explainability, reliability, governability, and bias mitigation. And this was also one of the results when we look at different principles that are out there. Many words seem to be very similar, but in the end, it's still not entirely clear when we develop actual AI use cases. What do they mean, in fact? And I think that's something that is still missing out there, how to allow for industry stakeholders to really develop trustworthy AI. And that's why I think it's necessary to also look beyond those already existing principles and really make them applicable and operationalize them to the industry world.
Thanks a lot, Vanessa. And I think it's now time to focus a bit more on the military, and I'm sure that you, Arnault, and also you, Bruno, would have some words to say about what's specific for the military domain or within defense in general.
Yes, of course. As it was said, there are a lot of ideas of regulation around, and especially in the civil context. And it was also mentioned that there are some characteristics that fit for civil application, but military application, they have a few differences. We will highlight here just a few of them. But the first one is regarding the data. Data in the civil world, they are collected with, of course, approval of the users in a particular context. They are in situation where the data are very large. We have these changes that have occurred in the artificial intelligence because we can rely on very large database. In the military sector, it's a little bit different. We have data. There are data existing. It could be that there are a lot of sensors, but the interesting one, the one we are really looking at, are extremely rare in the situation. So we call it frugal data, meaning that we have very little representation of what we really would like to know. So we can learn what is the normal way, but the exceptional one, which is most of the time what we want to react on, what we would like to have an automation, is extremely difficult to figure out. If we have learned maybe images from the space, which is one of the easy way to collect data. We can have database of enormous amount of things that are not exactly the situation to which we would like to react. So that's the first characteristic, which is completely different. We are facing a lack of data. It could be for a lot of different reasons. I mentioned because the things do not occur so often, and we are pleased that the major events do not occur often. It could be also because there are classification or restriction of use of the data, and the industry or the different people who made the algorithm cannot access to the real censored data that are belonging to the military, and they just keep this ownership for security reasons or for confidentiality reasons. That's the second topic, which is not easy. And there are some other differences. I will highlight the second one, which is the level of risk. If we look to the typical standard, and it was said before, when the European Union regulates the AI, they target a level of risk which is as low as possible. So they will figure out that there is a level which is acceptable, where we can tolerate that we live with a certain level of risk. And that's the same wherever it applies, whatever the system is, be it in whatever country, whatever situation. And typically, this does not fit at all with the military concern or military operation. Because then in that context, the level of risk which military are ready to take are heavily depending on what it is on. If it's a training situation, if we are a simulation, if we are just trying to make the people know how to react, the level of risk would be probably very limited at that point. If it's on the combat, if it's in a critical moment when there is a decision to be taken, the level of risk might be different. So one single level fitting all the situation would be probably not suitable at all in the regulation. And that is to be written somewhere. So if we have to apply the Act, we would have the minimal level of risk everywhere. And that is not very suitable. What do you think, Arnault?
No, it's true that the approach the civilian world has taken towards the risk mitigation of AI is a very classical one. It's risk management 101. So you describe your system, you describe where your system is going to be operate on, and then you measure how much occurrence they can have. This is critical, this is catastrophic, and then you try to measure it, like to measure it, how much it can occur. Is it 1 over a billion, 1 over 10 billion? And so you set a threshold. And basically, if you're under the threshold, you're good to go. In the military domain, the domain of operation will never be fixed. This is the key difference within the civilian and the military, because when you're designing an autonomous car, basically what you're saying is that I design a system that will drive on a road, and I know what a road is. A road is supposed to be black, with white lines. There will be signaling. There will be all the cars look like this. And so you know your domain of operation. In a war, in a theater, you will not know exactly what you're up against, because the opponent is adapting. The opponent is changing the rules all the time because he wants to survive. So as you. So you don't know exactly how the tank will look like. If tomorrow, I don't know, the tank, he will be painted in pink with Hello Kitty on the side, well, maybe your system to recognize tank will not say, well, this is not a tank. This is a bus for children because it has Hello Kitty everywhere. So your system will fail, because at no point in time your engineer will have the idea of verifying if my system is working, if my tank, my enemy tank is pink. And this is normal. This is embedded inside war. This is the fact that we adapt all the time. So the very assumption that the ODD, the operational design domain, will stay stable as in the civilian world is not true in the military. So we would need to have different way to design and to verify system with not the same minimum threshold working all the time, because this is a non-starter for military. So with that in mind, we need to define processes, we need to define life cycle, we need to define new standards different from the civilian one. We can maybe reuse some part of it, because not everything is not applicable. But we have to bear in mind, we cannot just copy past whatever the civilian world has done and just say, well, do the same, that would work. Because it won't. It work maybe in peacetime, but when will it be war? And maybe 2 weeks after the beginning of the war, things have changed so much that your system is no longer relevant. So we have to bear in mind that AI systems are evolutive, and they need to change over time, and we need to embed that into our own use of AI system within the military. Whereas in the civilian domain, the autonomous car will not change not so often. Maybe once a year we'll have an update, but will not change every battle, every week, or every month of the war. And this has not been done yet. This is something that is still being written and discussed within the standardization committee. And we need more of you coming in order to steer the discussion and see how we can achieve that, because this is new. This is not the scientist has envisioned for AI, but this is what we will have to do if we want to make AI work in the domain of the military, well, at least in theory.
Thanks, Arnault. I think we got at least part of the theory in place, and it was spiced a bit with the Hello Kitty tank. I'll for sure remember that one. So I think we now deserve to discuss how can we actually implement the theory in practice. And I believe, Vanessa, you would be the right one to turn to and explain to the audience maybe how the ALTAI methodology, which we have worked with a lot in the AI4DEF project, how that is helpful here. And then, Bruno, I would also turn to you and see if I could ask you to give some examples concerning the 4 use cases we have used in the AI4DEF project, how that applies to the ALTAI methodology. But on to you first, Vanessa, please.
Yeah, thank you. So, after we looked at the legal rules applicable and those soft law standards, we had a look at one particular document that prompted us to work mostly with the ALTAI methodology. And that is the FCAS Forum white paper on responsible use of AI. Because what they did basically is that they started with a civilian, soft law regulation, let's say, from the EU, and just asked, well, is this civilian standard actually applicable to our military purposes or not? Where do we need to adapt it? And maybe just as a background, the European Commission established the AI high-level expert group to define, just some ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI in the civilian domain, of course. And they said eventually, trustworthy AI combines 3 pillars, which is ethical, lawful, and robust AI. And in short, they developed then the assessment list for trustworthy AI. They again obviously compose a couple of standards. Here we have 7 key requirements that are human agency and oversight, 1, 2, technical robustness and safety, 3, privacy and data governance, 4, transparency, 5, diversity, and 6, societal and environmental well-being, and 7, accountability. And already just from hearing those different key requirements, you perhaps have some key requirements that are more applicable to the military domain and some that are less applicable. For instance, when it comes to societal and environmental well-being, it's also something to be kept in mind, but maybe, accountability and human agency are even more important in the military realm. And as I said, FCAS started with this civilian list, and they actually found out that most of those criteria are indeed applicable to the military world. That's why I think it's also good sometimes to, due to the absence of a military regulation, to look at what's out there in the civilian domain, use it, tailor it, and make it applicable to the military world. That's at least our approach that we followed here in AI4DEF. It also takes into account many of those soft law principles that we discussed earlier upon, because ALTAI also says, you know, trustworthy AI is just achievable if you have technical and non-technical elements that allow for sufficient control and make, you know, a given system eventually trustworthy. And what is really interesting about ALTAI here is that we don't just have those 7 key requirements and we don't really know what they mean. What we have is really a list of questions. So each of those elements contains a couple of questions that are to be posed to developers. And here, with those questions, some, you know, ideas might arise. Have you thought of this and that? And that's, I think, really helpful from the first day on to use a couple of, you know, questions to make your system eventually trustworthy. And in 2020, you know, this high-level expert group came up with this assessment list. And what we did in AI4DEF, we took this list in a couple of workshops, and we precisely asked which questions are applicable, which questions do need to be a bit tailored. And eventually we came up with a pretty concise list of questions that are to be posed to developers. And we did 2 more things with the ALTAI list. We said in the beginning, okay, we can divide questions to different types of questions. We said, okay, some of them are AI technique questions. Some are system questions, and some are, you know, more human-related questions. So we already cover a broad range of different questions here. What we did afterwards was to say, okay, you know what? Not all of the questions are really applicable from the first day on. We need to also develop, you know, a couple of different groups. So let's say which questions are relevant at the design stage, which are relevant at the implementation stage, and which are relevant at the use stage. And with all of that in mind, we developed an Excel sheet that it's really helpful for each of the use case owners in our project to, you know, get started to think about ethics. Because the problem often is that, you know, we as, you know, Elisabeth and I, we're researchers, we're doing a lot with the regulation and AI. But what is really important eventually, it is not us that we are not developing those AI techniques eventually, but it's really about industry, AI people, that they know how to make trustworthy AI. And that's why I believe this approach is really helpful, because it's not just abstract in general, it really goes deep into those key requirements and a couple of questions. What is also important here is there is no one-size-fits-all approach. It's not a checklist where you say, you know, 80% of the time, yes. And if you say all the time, yes, okay, then you have a trustworthy system. You always need to have ethical people around there too, to have a real discussion about your eventual use case. So, for instance, when we talk about human agency, you know, one question says, please determine whether your system is a human in the loop, on the loop, or in command system. It doesn't say yet whether it's right or wrong to do it in that way. It's just about raising awareness and asking people, do you know what you are actually developing? So at the first, you know, stage, you already need to have in mind, what is the purpose, what is the use of your AI system in the long run. And I think that's what is really beneficial of ALTAI and how we are using the list. Maybe Bruno, you want to add a couple of words, or Arnault? It's not just me that who was working on the list. We really had an interdisciplinary group that was looking at ALTAI and how we can make this list fit for purpose for the military realm.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick addition. The fact of the matter is when you're developing an AI system and you read regulation, you don't have a clue on how to do it in practice. Because the regulation doesn't come with the manual on how to do it. This is the role of standards to do it in Europe. And right now they're not written yet. They're still being, in process of being written. And so we need practical answer. like practical, process to enroll, to raise awareness, and to enroll people into thinking on how to do it in a trustworthy manner. And so this is a very practical manner. Like you have an Excel spreadsheet with question, you know when to pose the question and to whom, and then you try to have your answer reviewed all the time to see if it changed or if it's still valid. And so it's a way that we experiment within the consortium with the different use case owners to see how much we can engage them and have them, take into consideration the ethical matters, not just to tick the boxes, like she said. It's not a matter of just, yes, I'm working fine, please don't ask me anything. It's no. You have to do this by your own because it's important. It's not just a conformity matter.
And then I can elaborate a little bit on that and provide an example. Maybe just one word, because Vanessa mentioned the future combat aircraft system, which is a future generation, a next generation aircraft that is developed currently, started to develop in Europe. And this maybe is not known everywhere. If I just bounce on the educational role of the ALTAI checklist that you mentioned, that's something we have proven in the course of the project. At first, when people, engineers, look to what is the compliance to an AI standard, well, they are very tempted to say, but I'm a good guy, I'm working well, so everything is good. That's the first reaction. Or non-applicable. They have two options, not for me, and this I did well. So when you did that, in the end, it is nonsense. It is just you have not developed an AI system which is neither robust nor adapted to the operator. Most of them, they say also, well, have a good option in mind. This is for the operator in the end. So the AI system is just providing an advice. And then the operator has the full responsibility of doing it. Yes, but this is not what we target at. We target having systems that are reliable, where the design has been done properly, where if the operators, they are considered, they are educated for that. So it leads to a lot of different things. Some would have an impact on the design itself. For instance, if we need to know if the operators are satisfied, if we need to monitor the system on the run to detect any drift or any changes in the way it behaves, this is to be recorded. And that has to be prepared at the design time. It means that we have to make sure, if we provide recommendation, that we collect the opinion of the users. On the other side of the cycle, when it is in use and in the monitoring phase, then we also need to educate the operators so that they can tell whether this is true or not. What we do not want is that the operator either say, well, the AI has said that, so it's true, or we could have the other reaction, which is the AI has said something, so I do the contrary. And the two reaction would be absolutely terrible. That's exactly what we want to avoid. So it means that looking into this list of questions is a very good way to take on board all the people, including the users, the operators, including the designers, including the trainers, all the people who would have to take part to it, including the one who will deploy the system, and make sure that all of them have understood what is a reliable system.
And to jump on that, thinking of the operator and circling back with what Alex was explaining, how to choose the correct AI technique. This is also related to that, because if my operator is no data scientist, and I presented him an AI system with a machine learning model with billions of parameters, that's not the same as if I were giving him a decision tree, which is rather more, digestible for a human. So the very fact that right from the start, before even choosing your AI technique, you're starting to think, what would the operator look like? What are its competencies? What can he achieve in the given amount of time he has to use the system? Maybe he has like 10 milliseconds before reaction time, or maybe he has 1 hour. So these questions drive then the choice of the AI techniques. This becomes requirements on the AI and taken into account.
Thanks a lot. Elisabeth, you were kind enough to raise your hand and not just jump in, so I'll leave the microphone to you, please.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I might need to jump back a little to what Alex has said a couple of minutes ago. I just wanted to actually now also, of course, support what Vanessa's already flagged. I think even though I was not involved in a project, I do think that it totally makes sense to look at the civilian side of things and what kind of regulatory approaches have been taken in this regard. And I totally agree with Alex that, of course, you cannot entirely compare, not at all, the civilian and the military realm when you think about what the adversaries can do, how they can actually manipulate or challenge your own AI system. I totally agree that this is absolutely incomparable with the civilian side of things. However, I do think that even in the discussion on, now I'm coming back to autonomous weapon systems, we also had certain kind of, like areas that we consider to be very risky and areas which were less risky. For example, if you use an AI system where the civilians seem to be in the vicinity, of course, the risk of creating and causing collateral damage or violate the principle of proportionality is a lot higher than, for example, in cases and scenarios where you use the same system, for example, in the desert or even with a submarine. And I think here you can also see that maybe in the discussion, we had the discussion, as I said, especially in the area of autonomous weapon systems. But even here, you could see that we had some areas, some and some environments that were more dangerous to, for example, civilians, that were more challenging from a legal perspective, and therefore we can also see some similarities to the civilian sector, that we see certain areas which are more dangerous, high risk as regards other areas. So I think that there are some commonalities, at least from an abstract level. And I also found it really interesting to see what the EU AI Act had to say on human oversight, because this discussion is also quite old in the military realm. So I think I totally agree with you that it's not comparable at all. But on the other hand, I also see that there are some similarities and commonalities that really make sense to look at. And I think this is why this project apparently was so important, to say, okay, let's have a list and have some guardrails that help industry stakeholders to decide on what to do and what not. Thank you so much. And I didn't want to interrupt the discussion because it was going so well, but thank you for your patience.
And we exactly need to do what you said, looking into the civilian existing regulation to pick what is good in it. And sometimes some part of them would be fully inapplicable. I'm just taking as an example the part where we try to balance equally in all the different type of population or all the different situations. When talking with operational people about unbiased system, they first say, but I want my system to be biased. I want it to reach the enemy, not to reach my friends. So there are a lot of things that would not directly translate. It does not mean that there is no effort to perform. And I'm sure the data scientists behind will have a lot of things to do, but still, it is not just a one-to-one copy.
Very true. And thanks, Elisabeth, for the nice words. It's nice to have an external person saying that we are looking at the right things in our AI4DEF project. Just would any of you online have any not concluding remarks, but any feedback or things you would like to bring up now before I ask the audience for any questions? Because I feel you are being left out a bit since you're sitting all the way in Germany, but otherwise just raise your hand and I'll look at the screen constantly and make sure that you're not forgotten.
Yeah,
Okay.
I might say a couple of words after the audience raises some questions. I think that's best to get them involved as well.
That's perfect. Thanks you. So the audience is not that big, but I hope still you'll have a number of questions for us. Feel free to ask anything basically, and we'll do our best to answer you. So if we could just have a raise of hand. I don't even think we'll need a microphone, but sorry, yeah, we need it for the recording and for the ones online. Yeah. So any questions? Don't know.
It was a very good discussion regarding ALTAI methodology and security and something. I'm a cybersecurity officer working in Ministry of National Defense of RK. My question will be very related to the robustness and safety in ALTAI methodology. I'm currently working at AI security, especially for security AI perspective. To make a policy, the policy should be actionable and measurable. In terms of actionable, it is related to implementation. There are tons of regulations and requirements in ALTAI. For example, for the AI security perspective, the AI system not to be data should not to be poisoned, or the system should not be vulnerable for the evasion attack, as you mentioned. But the method or vulnerability related to the AI is very actively researched in the academia or research area. But to find how to implement the defense measure or mitigation for those vulnerability, it's hard to just say you have to implement cover the vulnerabilities. It's as a policymaker, it's hard to ask all of developer to meet the requirements. The first question is there any hurdle to apply ALTAI methodology for your project? And second question is related to measurability. It's related to test and evaluation. All the requirements, there should be other methodology to whether your implementation satisfy or not satisfy those requirements. So is there any methodologies or tools how you test for all the requirements mentioned in ALTAI in terms of AI security?
Yeah, I believe Arnault or Bruno would
Alright.
be the right ones to answer this.
Right. So the topic of cybersecurity is a hot potato right now. Indeed, it's full research area right now, and every week or month there is a new breakthrough that just make obsolete everything else. So it's true that right now you cannot have like one set of methods that you say, please do that, and that's it. You tick the boxes and you're fine. I think the only way forward is right now on the best effort methodology. Like at the time you're building the system, please be at the state of the art. And then in your design, insert some monitoring of your system so that you can detect when a new vulnerability has been detected or exploited by an attacker. And at this point, you can still be in line with the regulation because you have time to update your system. And so to put on a patch or an upgrade of your system in order to cover this new attack. Because the regulators are not entirely, they're not ignoring this problem, that it's not a classical piece of software we know how to protect. This is new technology which is evolving. So we need constant adaptation of these. So your first question was, is ALTAI has a burden regarding cybersecurity? Yes and no, because most of the requirements in ALTAI are on this level a little bit of generic, and so they don't express like clear methods to do and clear requirements, and so you have to rely on state of the art. And standards also are not there yet. We're actually launching right now the very first standards in Europe on cybersecurity. So it will take maybe 2 years before it's finished. So in 2 years, things will already change. So that I think answers the first question. The second question was about measurability. So since the attacks can change a lot, it's still difficult to have like a clear measurement. Like you cannot say my system is 4.32 safe. Like you don't have that. However, and here I might preach for my own church, because we develop tools for that. We develop tools to measure how much a system is able to cope, for example, with evasion attack. And so we can verify how much the input space is safe. So it's not perfect because we cannot guarantee 100%, the input space, but it's better than just picking some data points and hoping for the best. So there is still research, but there's already solution popping up, trying to fill in the gap within the processes of making a trustworthy AI, and especially on the cybersecurity aspect. And I hope in the near future, maybe a few years, these ecosystem will stabilize and start to be interoperable, so that the AI makers and the AI pipeline makers, the one that provide the tools for the AI makers, will embed such solutions within the processes they sell, so that they will have like at least processes that look like what is expected by ALTAI and the EU AI Act. And in the long run, maybe by 2030, we'll have like certification in place with, processes that will allow you to have a product certification at the end.
And
I hope that answers your question.
If I may add my few cents on that, the first one is that we need to stay humble. It is still at the infancy. We are just starting to put AI system on military context. So in that respect, not everything is written yet. The second is that we still have good principle that we may apply, and the AI is not whole the system, it's just a small bit in it. So we have practices, we have people looking for vulnerabilities, we have database that we can test against, and that's a good way to secure a part of the system. We still may apply all the typical cybersecurity recommendation to secure our own IT system, and especially securing the data sets that we have. And that's maybe the third part where we can elaborate as well. The models, they are not built from scratch, they are built from data sets. If we capitalize on the data sets and we exchange, for instance, in the military sector, the type of data sets on which we can rely, then at least we secure the fact that there are not so much vulnerability per se in the data sets. That's a way to grow progressively on that topic and better onboard the vulnerability that could be really deep into the system. So there are a few directions in which we can go. It's not everything, but it could be the state of the art at a point in time. Then I just want to mention the very good database that are all over the world. There is one on the MIT, but there are others that register all the vulnerabilities that are known at a point in time. And if you consider that, that could be the state of the art as per today.
Yeah, mastering the database, if you're doing supervised machine learning, especially, will be crucial. That's true. However, if you do it dealing with maybe language, we know that you will have to train on some stuff that is found out online, and we know that it's already being poisoned. Company has already been playing with that. So, and it's totally biased. Most of what is written on the internet is biased. So we know that we will have plenty of problems if we use this kind of open source. But if you are able to have your own data set, which costs money to make, then you might be able to mitigate at most these issues.
Thank you. And Vanessa, I believe you have something to add.
Yes, thank you for the question. I really understand the desire to have something measurable. On the other hand, I must say, being the ethics advisor in this project, I don't think we can fully measure trustworthiness. That's why we included in our ALTAI methodology not just a box for saying yes or no, but we really ask, which measures did you put in place, for instance, to do verification and validation. So after someone has completed the list, it's still, partly my job to look at the answers and maybe dig deeper and ask, okay, why did you do it in this way or that way? And I think this really helps to have this group of people working together on trustworthiness. And therefore measuring such, system in terms of trustworthiness, I don't think is possible, simply because we don't have a one-size-fits-all approach. It really depends so much on how you want to use a given system. And that's why I think it's really important to look at the context, right? When we talk about autonomy, for instance, you may be allowed to use far more autonomy if you are, in a circumstance of being on the high sea, don't really having a lot of civilian targets being around there. In this circumstance, a given autonomy might be far more easy to use than in a complex urban battlefield. And that's why it's so important to have those discussions on trustworthy AI together with a group of people that are able to look at the specific use case and what you want to achieve with it. So basically, ALTAI really helps you to start thinking about your eventual goal with the system and how to have sufficient measures to mitigate the risks.
Thank you, Vanessa. So did you get an answer, at least some inspiration for the two questions you asked? Perfect. Thank you very much. Other questions in the audience? Please.
Hi, my name is Niklas Erbach. I'm here with the German delegation and working for BWI. My question is, on the one hand, like how many different question points do you have within your conformity assessment procedure? Are you kind of weighting them differently to the different topics? And did you, during your use case, have you done like several use cases so that you kind of can say how long it will take to conduct the conformity assessment? And if you have thought about more general organizational AI governance structures, and if so, like who is responsible, who will do what within the organization? Thank you.
I can start, and Vanessa, please feel free to complete. Initially, the ALTAI checklist is some 150 questions. That's quite a lot. And because people, when they look at it first, they are not really educated, they can run it in 1 hour, meaning that they go through, they tick all the boxes, and that's done. What we did was really different. We sub-select what is applicable at each phase, as we said. So in design, we now should end up with some 50 questions. And you need to go through it, which is quite an effort, I must say. It is probably most of them just are for the developers, but a little bit of operators is good as well. And it would be half a day to just run through it and understand exactly what the consequence would be. I think the cybersecurity example was an extremely good one to just have this in mind. What would be the consequence of a failure of my system? So repeatedly, we recommend that it is used different times at different maturity of the system, from the very early stage to when it matures really better, much more, and when it is ready for deployment and going to the operators. That is an effort. I mean, it's not nothing. It is limited, and there is a feedback loop to be prepared so that if something emerged from the list, well, how do we take the opinion of the operators? How do we make sure that there will be enough educated, how to explain what is the success rate of the AI, the ratio. Data scientists, they are very good at saying, yeah, this I put, I recognize this type of thing and it's 62%. What does it mean for an operational person? 62, meaning that I should believe to it or I don't. What process is to be put behind? How to educate the operator and how to educate the data scientist. Both are needed to be educated in that respect. So I would say it is a part of the effort of the design. I would recommend multidisciplinary teams to really enter deep into the questions. If I just provide you with a number, would you have enough information to take your decision in an educated way? Would you need some reference information like reference picture? Would you like to have stars to measure the quality of the algorithm? Would you like to have different algorithms competing and maybe a vote that is something which is extremely robust? We had to implement this kind of stuff. That's maybe the summary of what I can say.
Maybe to answer some of the points you raised. So, I don't think we have put weights on the question. We considered it each one equally. It's not per se a conformity assessment because that would require we have a quality management system in front of it in order to assess it. So it's more for guidelines right now. It would be able to evolve as a conformity assessment, but it's not yet there. And another point you raised was the governance. Yes. So right now, this is the only part where I think we have some quite good documents yet already on the table. We have 42001, for example, the ISO standards on that. So at the governance level, we have some equipment already there to be used, which is really relevant also for the military. It's on the technical level, really for the engineers, that we're still waiting for new standards and new methodology to operate these questions in a very precise manner. I think that's, and on the timing also, how much time it takes for the engineers to process the question. Do we have these metrics there?
I might answer that.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly, because that was basically one of the problems when we started the project, and we just basically rolled out the ALTAI list. You know, as Bruno said, a lot of questions, we already deleted a couple of them, but it was a lot, and it was not fully clear, you know, for the use case owners how they should answer the questions. And that's why we said, okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to divide those questions in 4 different stages. So basically, ethics is not just a ticking box that you do at one point in time, but you should do it various times. So for instance, you start at the very early stage, design. So you just get those questions that are really relevant for the design stage. And if you do this with a group, I think you can do it in 60 to 90 minutes, I would say. You can also talk about it for 5 hours, obviously. But again, it's not really about doing it once. So 60 minutes is enough, and then you have a trustworthy system. But it's just the very first stage where you say, okay, let's start about thinking, you know, how to make the system trustworthy. And I think that's why it's really helpful, at least that's the feedback that we got from the use case owners, that the way we tailored it right now reduces the amount of work, it makes it less complex and more easy to understand. And afterwards, obviously, you should have feedback sessions. So with me, like the ethics advisor there, and really engage the discussion. The project is still ongoing till the end of November, so we are still working a bit on, you know, use case feedback. I'm confident that we are able to, you know, publish, you know, something that is related to the ALTAI list, because obviously we want to use this as a starting point and get the feedback directly from the industry. That's so helpful about having this EU project where we can work together with academia and industry here. But I'm really happy to also get in touch bilaterally to, you know, share some more insights, and after the project to, share a bit more of numbers too, that I think is relevant for the public.
Thank you all. Did you get answers to your question? Perfect. I think there was another gentleman with a question.
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like first to thank you for being all with us today, whether it's physically or online. So my name is Atif Othman. I am a technical manager and researcher at a Korean company which focuses on trustworthy AI. And it's called Think for Better Life. And it's actually one of the pioneer companies in trustworthy AI nationally. So that's why actually I was very interested in this topic, and I don't regret at all coming here. It was very interesting. Thank you all. It was so interesting that some of the questions I was writing, I had to cross them because the next person answered before I had a chance to ask. Having said that, I still have like a couple of questions I would like to ask. The first one is related to the first part, which mentioned selecting like techniques or models from the like civil realm to use in the military side. So when mentioning that, you discussed or you talked about evaluating based on, and one of the main things was you mentioned was explainability. So in that aspect, when you say evaluate based on explainability, do you mean some sort of qualitative evaluation, or is it like some quantitative, some techniques that we can quantitatively evaluate if the technique and model is explainable? And the second question is related to the use of the ALTAI list and adaptation in order to use for the military domain. And I think that was actually very nice, the way how it was like organized into all these sections, because I personally went through the ALTAI document, and while it's really very informative and it's very useful for someone who's learning about trustworthy AI, it can be a little bit confusing about, okay, when should I consider this? Who should I consider this? So like organizing it this way is actually a very, very nice idea. So my question is actually, since I believe you mentioned it's also relying on the 7 requirements of ethics that was set by the high-level expert group. Given that the military domain, just like Dr. Arnold mentioned earlier, has some unique also characteristics, like using the Hello Kitty, for example, for messing up with the algorithm, for example. And I believe there are also other like points that, or other, I would say, characteristics that are unique to the military domain. So did you, having said that, did you like extend on the existing list, or do you consider extending on these requirements to add some that are more related to the military side? And one final question, although I might already know the answer to this, but just in case, is the list going to be available publicly at some point for other people to also like base on it? Thank you.
Thank you for all the questions. If we take them from one end, I believe Alex would be the one to answer the first question.
Yes. Yeah, so like regarding the selection and utilizing some of these features like explainability, so it is very difficult to actually evaluate whether this is explainable, especially when you're looking at an AI technique like singularly, like only this, because for a feature like, for example, explainability, you would maybe require other systems to then enhance the explainability of that other AI technique. So we in our case we looked into the expertise of the domain experts, like so is it actually possible to use this model to explain the underlying structure of the decision that AI technique is using.
Thank you. The question number 2, I believe that would be you, Vanessa. If you remember question number 2 about
I certainly
expanding the
remember the
list
question.
or expanding
Yes.
the ALTAI list.
Yeah, so about the distribution eventually and making it public, I think we are really working on that because we don't really want to keep it just for ourselves. So I'm confident on that. And the other turn of the question, sorry, maybe you need to remember me again of that, or someone in the room can jump in.
Is it okay? Are we planning to expand the list of the question from the ALTAI, or just sticking with the one we have?
We adapted a couple of questions. I wouldn't say we extended them because there was already quite a big number of questions, but a couple of them were really focusing on the civilian world. So obviously military systems might harm people, but the question is not about harming people or not, but it's about harming the right people and not the wrong people. So we needed to adapt a couple of them. We didn't really add them, but what we still do is taking into account all those legal regulations and soft law standards in total. So they are always a part of the assessment as well.
Thank you. Did you get the... Did you hear that, Vanessa? No, you didn't, because he didn't have a microphone.
So my question was more about extending the requirements than the questions. So the requirements that ALTAI has now are more focused on the civil world, but are there other requirements that we could consider later that would be more focused on the military side than the civilian side?
From my perspective, just I think right now we have not expanded it to new requirements. We are just rewording the requirements to better fit to the military world. There could be, if in the future we observe some regulation that concur to having some additional requirements, then we can take them on board. The one I mentioned earlier was that the level of risk is variable over time. That is typically what is fixed by the rule of engagement, for instance. That's something which is a contradiction to the initial ALTAI checklist, and that is easy to adapt to what is in the list actually, without new entries so far. That's an example, but very happy to consider some more. Probably not on the course of the project. Regarding the publication itself, I think you have the proper word. It is something which is delivered to our authority, which is the European Union. It's public within the European Union, so at least that is possible. I think it is one of the documents of the project that we really would like to make even more public. We could release the updated list. That's something to be discussed at project level.
Thank you all. So you got an answer this time. Perfect. Perfect. Is there one final quick question and an even quicker answer? Then we'll have time for it. Okay. Maybe that was a leading way of saying it, that we have come to the conclusion of our panel discussion. And I really hope that you enjoyed it, even though it's not a full room. I hope those of you who are here that you enjoyed it. For us, it was very important to share our findings and what we have worked with for the past almost 3 years in the AI4DEF project. And I hope you picked up from what we said today, the highlights of the benefits and the relevance of having an adapted framework and to constantly assess ethics. Is very true that it is not something that we just did in week 4 of the project. We did this in several iterations, and it became less and less scary for the people in the project. So that's highly recommendable. And I mean, AI adoption is based on trust, and trust is also built on proper risk management, which is something that in the defense industry we have worked with for many, many years. So I think that it's part of managing risk is to have the system engineering approach, which is something that is not unfamiliar for us at all. And it gives us an opportunity to deal with the AI, the flexibility, the agility, the speed, so that we can develop trustworthy products in the future. So I hope you found it interesting. I hope you'll visit our website. You see it here. It's AI4DEF.eu or .com. You can also scan the code. And you're more than welcome, of course, to pick up the A4 poster that we put on your chairs. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you, Vanessa and Elisabeth, for joining early morning in Germany. And thank you to Arnault, Alex, and Bruno, who are with me today. Thank you all.